Greetings, Ish.
Good afternoon, THAMI, and
how are you,
to all your listeners. Good, thank you. Good to be on your program. Thank you for the invitation.
It's good to have you, Ismail. As you know, I've been wanting to have an engagement with you, so I'm glad finally it's happening. Welcome everyone to tonight's show. This is the State of the Arts with THAMI AKA MBONGO, and today we are bringing you Ismail Mahomed, who is the director for Center for Creative Arts at the University of KZN in Natal. He was the former artistic director at the National Arts Festival and also former CEO at the Market Theatre Foundation. During his tenure at the Market Theatre Foundation, he invoked the Protected Disclosure Act to expose irregular and illegal funding payment that the Council of the Market Theatre wanted to make to itself. With more than 35 years in the cultural sector, he has won several awards nationally and internationally. Accomplished playwright and cultural administrator. As an accomplished playwright, his work has been staged in South Africa, Chile, Denmark, Germany, and in the United States. Ismail, you've got a very big bio, and I think we are going to be talking about some of the work that you have been doing over the years, and we hope it's going to be a great session. Let's start from the start. Today it's Women's Day commemoration. Is there any message that you want to send out to women, especially in the cultural and creative industry? Over to you, Ismail.
Thank you very much. I don't think it's our responsibility as men to send out messages to women. I think it's our responsibility as men today to be listening, to keep our ears on the ground and to heed what is being said by women, and that we need to take leadership from those women in our sector who have been playing a dynamic role, and also those women whose voices still need to be heard.
Thank you very much, Ismail. Ismail, I want us to take it from the beginning. I was aware that you've done some work as the artistic director back in Mpumalanga, Witbank. Can you share us your experience of that time so that we really understand? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people maybe who started to know your work when you were at the National Arts Festival. So can you take us through the work that you've been doing in Mpumalanga?
Thank you. You know, I started my career initially as a mathematics teacher, and I got involved in the arts at that particular time, largely because, you know, at the time when I wanted to study, the schooling system in South Africa, particularly in what was the old Transvaal, did not provide music theatre or dance as part of the school curriculum. Indian kids in Natal could access music and drama education and so forth. I got an introduction to the arts through what was considered protest movements in Lenasia at the time. There was a rich movement that opposed apartheid at that particular time, and that used the arts through to achieve the objectives. So, in the 80s, I got more drawn into the arts sector. In the 90s, I was fortunate to have had an exchange program to the US with the specific objective of wanting to go into arts management or arts administration or cultural leadership, as it's now called, kind of thing. And I'd come back in 1995 with having applied for a vacancy for a position in Mpumalanga, having worked all along in Johannesburg. I then became the first person of color, or the first Black person to be appointed at the Witbank Civic Theatre. Now, that was a very interesting theatre in the sense that it was built to celebrate the Afrikaner Voortrekker legacy by the nationalist government. To a repertoire of the white Afrikaans, mainly Afrikaans work. Driving a transformation agenda. One is around creating those who are not part of that theatre. The other was to create an economy with the theatre, so that people get from working in the theatre spaces, and the production.
It seems as if we are losing you, Ismail.
Yes, it seemed like we got lost. But as I was saying, I got to Witbank, and for me, there were two objectives around the transformation agenda. The one is to create equal access to the theatre. The other was to those who worked in the arts sector were able to years, and we were able to build a very, very successful theatre there, following which I decided to return to Johannesburg, then joined the American Embassy for a further 5 years before I went to Grahamstown, Makanda, to work as artistic director.
Sure, Ismail, I'm sure. Can you also now let us look at your time at the National Arts Festival, because it's a very huge festival. Obviously, coming from Mpumalanga, it was a smaller nyana one, if we can call it. But the National Arts Festival, which is recognized worldwide, it's sort of like a big thing. So how was your strategy, your vision when you started to take over, and what are the things that you really feel proud that you have achieved?
Well, prior to having taken on the position of artistic director of the National Arts Festival in Makanda, I had been attending the Fringe with productions as a Fringe producer for at least 20 years, since the 80s. So I had a very intimate knowledge and experience of that particular festival, but also having worked as what was a marginalized artist on the Fringe, That redress was not going to be a ticking box exercise for me, or just by representation to make sure that we seem politically. Be how do we make real meaningful, in 1995, before I became the director, I was the largest independent producer, non-funded independent producer at the National Arts Festival, with 6 different productions. In 1996, I took 13 different productions under an umbrella of Creative Arts Workshop of various independent producers to the National Arts Festival. So when I got to the National Arts Festival in 2008, I had a clear indication of how we needed to support artists. I also was quite determined to break what I considered to be cabals that existed in what was the then committee, because Natal had not been represented on the festival main program for at least about 19 years. And I was sure to bring Natal back onto the main program. I was also determined to bring on artists, like Ismail Mahomed and her theater onto the main program, the Fugard Theater, and as more and more independent theaters were being established, to be able to bring those independent theaters onto the main program as well. But I was particularly interested in growing the international footprint of the main program as a two-way stream for South African productions that, or artists, not necessarily just productions, but even artists that could be engaged with internationals on the main program, who would then be invited across to be able to take their work abroad, or to be able to bring international work to South Africa. And that happened whether it was community-based artists or mainstream professional artists. And I think you'd know, because you were involved in what was the Remix Development Program, where you had met with artists from UK, and you were subsequently invited to the UK on an exchange program. Likewise, Amsa, who performed on the main program, was invited to perform at the Romania Shakespeare Festival, and thereafter was able to build kind of networks and was able to travel across to several other festivals. So for me, it was about how can the main program be a point of linkages for our artists. We knew that very often the only opportunities that South African artists would have to travel abroad was through invitation, because our country does not have a developed international touring policy that is administered by the Department of Arts and Culture. These kind of opportunities, whether it's the big name artists, whoever, or small independent artists, are definitely dependent on invitations from abroad to be able to take their work there.
And then, Raish, after that, you left Makanda, and then you were the CEO. Now, a totally different, if I can say, role from being an artistic director of the National Arts Festival to being the CEO of one of the biggest theaters in the world. So how was the experience for you to be working at Market Theatre, and how did you adjust from the previous position into that one?
I had intended to stay at the National Arts Festival for 5 years. I ended up staying for 8 years before I decided that I needed to hand the baton over to somebody else. I'm a firm believer in succession, that one needs to take an institution up to a particular point where you have a vision, and you then hand over that baton to somebody else to take it into new direction. When I got to the Market Theatre Foundation, I had a long history of association with the Market Theatre from the 70s, when I was a student, and right through the 80s, when I used to take students across. And of course, the historical legacy of the Market as being the voice of freedom, the voice of artists, and an essential part of our liberation struggle. So, of course, one entered the Market Theatre Foundation with a sense of pride. But I must say it was an incredible disappointment, probably the biggest disappointment in my career, because the Market Theatre of the 2000 under the new government is not the Market Theatre under a struggle for liberation. And what I mean by that is that, the fact that the board is appointed by the minister and is driven with a particular agenda to serve ministerial objectives rather than the objectives of the artists is problematic. But what is most problematic was that, I had to deal with uncovering levels of corruption in the board of the Market Theatre Foundation, and that in trying to uncover the corruption of that particular board, I wanted to take payments from the salaries of the staff to pay themselves a legal bonus. There was resistance but there also was resistance by a group within that council that had manipulated some staff, to go against myself and the CFO, who has an incredible track record of integrity, and after trying to engage the minister, who is as deaf as a rock about the levels of corruption, I had decided to invoke the Protect Disclosures Act, expose the levels of corruption, of course, with that great deal of victimization, allegations, false allegations, labeled against myself and the CFO. But my approach was, bring it on. I'll deal with you, because what we've done is on the basis of integrity, and we will take it up in a Section 118A Protected Disclosures hearing, which we did, and we won the case. And even though there was a forensic investigation at Market Theatre with trumped up charges and so forth, not a single one of any of those charges had stayed. And this is the problem with the way the THAC constitutes its forensic investigations, in that they ask those that are guilty to draft the terms of reference. And this is very much the case that is presently happening at the National Arts Council, in that the allegations of corruption are against the National Arts Council. But the terms of reference for the forensic investigation are then not drawn up by the people who have made the allegations. It is drawn up by those who are at the core of the allegations. Of course, they're going to write up terms of reference that derive the kind of answers they want. And that's exactly what happened at the Market Theatre Foundation. But having challenged that through an open process and through the legal systems available to us in the country, both the CFO, Christine MacDonald, and I were able to win our case hands down. And the Market Theatre was forced then to pay us our legal fees and to enter into a settlement agreement and to apologize for what had happened. And of course, when that had happened, I had decided that I wanted to close that chapter of my life. The Market Theatre for me is not the Market Theatre of the 70s and the 80s, which is tied with our liberation struggle. The Market Theatre for me of the present time is a reflection of institutions run by our government, particularly by the DAC, that have failed and betrayed our liberation struggle.
So, Ismail, just in case for other people, especially the young generation, can you explain more to us about the Protected Disclosure Act and how does it work?
Sure. The Protected Disclosures Act is a law that's brought in South Africa to expose and to allow people, citizens to be, or employees to expose corruption in their companies or their organizations and so forth. But you can't just go out and blow the whistle and think you can do it. What you've got to do is you've got to build up a substantial level of evidence. You've got to follow through every level, step up. And when you feel that you're not going to win any support for exposing the corruption, you then can take the matter to the media, or you could take it through other public forums where you expose it. Now, what had happened in this particular case is that when the council had decided to pay themselves an illegal wanted 100,000 rands as a bonus. And this is over and above what they earn as honorariums for coming to meetings. A member was going to earn 75,000 rands as a bonus, over and above what they get paid as honorariums for coming to meetings. And the audit committee, which was the most shocking, which ought to have been the safeguard in that institution to say to the council, what you're doing is illegal in terms of the Public Finance Management Act. You cannot take those funds. The audit committee was in cahoots with the council because every member of the audit committee was going to be paid 37,500 rands. Now, we had brought this to the attention of the DAC, we had brought it to the attention of the minister, and to the credit of the minister, Nathi Mthethwa, he had intervened at that particular time, and he prevented the board from taking that money. He turned the resolution around. But the board itself was not going to take that sitting down. The board was still determined that they wanted the money, and they were going to fight for it, and they were going to make my life and Christine's life terribly miserable because we had prevented them from literally stealing that money. And what we then did is that when the situation became untenable, because the chairperson of the council at that particular time, Kwanele Gumbi, had convened an irregular meeting with the staff. A chairperson of a council cannot convene a meeting with the staff. The staff don't report to the council. The staff report to the CEO of an organization, and the CEO in turn reports to the council. So the chairperson convened a meeting with the staff, at which point he made terrible allegations about what Christine and I had done to prevent them from getting the money and so forth. And a staff member who was appalled by what was happening there had recorded that particular meeting. I had a meeting with one of the foreign embassies on that particular day, and this was the day that the chairperson decided to come to the theater to have that particular meeting, and I was not present. But a staff member had brought the recording to me. I was appalled by what I'd heard, with so many false allegations, up to the most embarrassing allegation that the chairperson had made, that he had played a significant role in getting the University of Johannesburg to give what is an Esther Mahlangu an honorary doctorate, which is blatantly false, because universities don't operate in that particular way. And of course, the university had rejected that particular claim that was made by the chairperson. That I felt this was now untenable. You cannot continue to have a council that is operating in the way that they are operating, firstly trying to steal money, then trying to manipulate the situation, then trying to manipulate the situation and victimize people that have opposed corruption. And of course, one of the people that had been terribly victimized at that particular time was the young activist artist Yusra Badin, who had been appointed to work at the Market Theatre as an audience engagement strategist, and who had covered gross violations of sexual harassment, sexual abuse at the Market Theatre Foundation, which had been pushed under the carpet and so forth. And a dossier was prepared about that. And of course, Yusra then became a victim because she was seen to be on the side of the CEO who was exposing the council and whatever. And what we then did is I invoked the Protected Disclosures Act. What it means by that is I found myself a really good lawyer and decided that I am now going to blow this to the media. And I'd given the tape recording of that irregular meeting to the media, but I'd also provided substantial documentation that I'd accumulated, which was letters from the chairperson to management, or the letters from the minister, for example, where he said it's illegal for the board to claim those monies, and a range of other correspondence. So the Protected Disclosures Act really is a protective mechanism for employees, that when you feel you exposed in your space and you are not any or through the other public civic structures that you may have. And of course, it's not an easy thing, because you must know that with it, you are going to have to face legal bills. You are going to be victimized further. So you need to have a great deal of tenacity to be able to survive the victimization that comes along with it, the allegations that they will further trump up to try and discredit you, and all of that. You know, in my case, I knew that 100% I had a solid case of exposing corruption, and that nothing was going to make me scared of what had happened. That I was going to take it to its fullest extent, and I had the legal resources, or the money to, at least, to be able to pay for the legal resources. But I knew that in the end, when I'm going to win my case, they are going to pay me every cent back for my legal fees, which is exactly what had happened.
So, Praish, how did you, I'm sure it really affected you emotionally, psychologically, and all that. And how did you manage to say you are going to keep your head up and continue doing in terms of the work that you've been doing after that whole thing?
Well, you know, my focus around work is very clear. That even when all of this was happening, the Market Theatre Foundation was still winning awards. We won the prestigious Prince Claus Award, International Award. Our lab students were doing incredibly well. They produced that superb production, Hani, and there were several achievements under our belt at that particular time. Because the one thing that I did is I said to the staff, I don't care what is happening around us, but for as long as I am the CEO of this institution, you report to me and you will deliver, and I'll hold you accountable to your performance agreement. So, you know, yes, they didn't like that. And of course, some of them trumped up some allegations and whatever, because I'd victimized some people, you know, that I'd victimized some people and so forth, simply because I had disciplined them. You know, for breaking the rules. And amongst the people that I disciplined was somebody who had fabricated invoices, another person who had taken petty cash and bought alcohol, which is in violation of the petty cash regulations and so forth. And the corrupt chairperson had manipulated, mobilized the 6 people that I had in some way or the other disciplined and got them to trump up charges. But I knew, bring those charges on, I'll deal with you in the way that I've dealt with the council, because not one of your allegations will hold. Throughout my career, I've had a reputation for doing things transparently, for doing things straightforwardly. It may not always be very popular, but I don't go for what is popular. I go for what is right, and I go for what is going to be of benefit to the arts sector and what I believe has to be done with absolute integrity. So, you know, the popularity stakes don't matter to me. What is most important is that those who have worked with me and those who have benefited out of the processes through which I create work will understand the value of what we do. And that for me was important, which kept me sane. But of course, that entire experience does take a toll. I cannot think of any whistleblower in South Africa, and you know, there are enormous numbers of whistleblowers in South Africa who have been through an enormous amount of personal turmoil. You know, it takes a toll on your health. It takes a toll on you emotionally, psychologically. It takes a toll on your finances because you have to fight. You know, you don't know who you could trust because, you know, all of that becomes a intricate little web of that you're fighting. But, you know, I was very fortunate in the sense that when I blew the whistle together with the CFO of the institution, who had worked at the institution for many, many years, and who literally had saved that institution many, many times before I had even got there. But, you know, it was not unusual that what had happened to me, my predecessor at the Market Theatre, Annabelle Lebete, had also tried to had fought against the very same thing, where the council had tried to scheme funds for themselves irregularly and so forth, and she had resisted that. And of course, you know, she was kind of in some way worked out of that particular institution by that very, very, very corrupt board. And that board is appointed, unfortunately, by Nathi Mthethwa, who should be taking responsibility for the failure of those institutions.
Before we move on from Market Theatre, and then we are going to talk about minister and the department. But I just want to ask you something, because I remember when you were going to go to the Market Theatre, one of my concerns was Bra Ismail is coming as the artistic director from the National Arts Council. So I wonder if there are going to be conflict of programming when you go to Market Theatre, you understand, because there's already a artistic director. And I know in South Africa, there are some institutions that you've got the CEO, artistic director, and some are done by one person. Can you break it like in easy terms for us in terms of the job of the CEO, the job of artistic director? Thanks.
Well, I'm very clear about what my roles are. I knew that when I was going to go as the CEO to the Market Theatre Foundation, that the Market Theatre Foundation had an artistic director, and that my role as a CEO is to provide the kind of infrastructural and the institutional support through which art can be made. I made it very clear to James, who's the artistic director there, and with whom I worked incredibly well and whom I respect enormously, that, I will support every artistic decision you take. But you must understand that I will ask lots and lots of questions, that I will ask whether this fits in with the national agenda for the arts. I will ask questions around how representative are we? I will ask lots and lots of different questions about how we're reaching out to audiences. What's our budget spent on this, which are things that a CEO needs to do. But I will never question what you do in the rehearsal room artistically and what you put out on the stages. I may agree with what you're putting out on the stage. I may like what you're putting on the stages. There are some things that I don't like what you put on the stages, and so, but that's natural. We don't always love everything that people put up. But I will support your right as the artistic director to have artistic independence. And I think that is something that I would safeguard for any artistic director that I work with. Because your role as the CEO of an organization is not to interfere in the artistic product. Your role as the CEO of an institution is to create a broad vision for an institution, a long-term vision, and a sustainable vision. And the role of an artistic director is to populate content into that particular vision. And I firmly believe that you can have a harmonious relationship between a CEO and an artistic director, that they don't have to be in conflict with each other. Yes, they must be able to agree and disagree strongly and honestly, but for common purpose. And I think that's what I appreciated about working with James and Kobo, in that I was able to provide him with the space to create what he needed to do artistically, and yet be able to support and defend what he did, artistically. I may not have liked every single production, but there isn't a single CEO of any company that will say, "Oh my God, why did we do that?" Or "Why? What did you mean by that? Oh, what was that production about?" I think that's normal that we do that. We assess, But the exciting thing about the creative process is you never know what you're going to end up with until you've taken that risk, that creative risk, and materialized that risk. But what I was able to do is to be able to develop an artistic policy at the Market Theatre, which would guide the way the Market Theatre creates work, in terms of how it broadens access, in terms of how it broadens the net of people that can get employed at the Market Theatre. So it's not becoming the kind of closed circle of the same actors and the same directors all the time. There are clear guidelines in place that I put in through the policy that guides the way the institution needs to work. And I think if there's anything that I'd consider as an achievement of my work at the Market Theatre, it was to have put into place several policies that guide the way the institution ought to move in the future.
And now, Ismail, let's talk about, because you also mentioned the minister and the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. And I'm always asking myself, why in the cultural and creative industry, we don't have people that are declared delinquently, because you get these board members that are serving in this board, and then they'll be shifted by the same minister to go and work on a totally different. And as you mentioned, same thing is happening with the National Arts Council. And I know you open a Facebook group saying educating Nati. So what is your take? And I know a lot of people are disappointed. They were expecting for Nati Tetra to go when the president was doing a reshuffle. And we don't know where to go. What is your take with our minister and the department? What needs to be done?
You know, Natim Tetwa is a very small part of our problem. And I'll say it again, Natim Tetwa is a very small part of our problem. Yes, he lacks leadership. He lacks an understanding of the arts. He has no strategy. He has no vision. He's stone deaf. He would tweet out the most stupid stuff. He doesn't understand the difference between art and celebrities, showbiz celebrities. He comes alive when there's funerals, and he's earned that title of Minister of Congratulations and Condolences. And there's a lot that one can point wrong about him. But Natim Tetwa is the least of our problems. The biggest part of our problems is a dysfunctional DAC. And it doesn't matter, tomorrow if the president has to remove the minister and put somebody else there, the DAC will continue to operate with the same level of dysfunctionality, the same level of lack of trust and integrity, and that because that bureaucracy and that administration lacks strategy. The role of a minister is to provide a broad vision and a broad guideline in the same way as a CEO of an organization does. And of course, his responsibility is to crack the whip and to hold people accountable. But there are people within the DAC that are completely dishonest, that are corrupt, that have no integrity, that have disappointed the arts sector through five different administrations. So, we're not dealing with a DAC that has become dysfunctional under Natim Tetwa. We're dealing with a DAC that has become increasingly dysfunctional from the original dysfunctionality that existed. It's only grown worse. So there's, if one really has to rectify the situation, it means that you really need to start off with the DG. If you begin to look at, other departments of government, they work incredibly well, partly because they have a minister that is here on the and secondly, have a deep, and we ask ourselves the constant question: to what extent is our DG really engaging with the sector rather than just responding to our problems? Does that, he does it so damnably. It's an issue that we need to begin to deal with. And my personal experiences of Natim Tetwa, are varied. When I was at the National Arts Festival in Grahamstown, that's when I had my very first experience with Natim Tetwa. He had come to open the festival because, it's always opened the night before by the East Cape government. I've taken 4 arts ministers on art walkabouts: Lulu Tsingwana, Paul Mashatile, Paulo Jordan, and also Natim Tetwa. Natim Tetwa was the only minister who asked questions about the artwork, who knew the artists, who knew something about the artists. And I said to him, Minister, we have some time. Shall I take you to see the Rooksloof exhibition? And he stepped in his footsteps. He smiled. He's a minister. He has a stupid bureaucracy. That was my one interaction with him. The other time I saw a more positive interaction with him was soon after he was appointed. He had convened a meeting with key people representing various sectors. And this meeting was a closed shop meeting that was held at the airport hotel in Johannesburg when he had the previous DG, Vuyo Jack, who is renowned for empowerment in this country. And at that particular meeting, Natim Tetua had engaged us as representatives of various sectors. And I was representing the festival sector because, of course, the National Arts Festival was the largest festival in South Africa and on the continent, and the second largest in the world. So we did have a great deal of gravitas to be able to speak on behalf of the festival sector. And that meeting was a very proactive meeting and a very respectful meeting. And I sat in awe of that meeting, together with various people from other parts of other sectors of the arts community. And we went out with a sense of optimism that this minister may be able to do something for the sector. But I also saw how at the conference in Bloemfontein, when the first conference of SIFSA that had broken into absolute chaos times, and how the minister was to use his negotiating skills and to be able to pull that conference back each time. So he's not a stupid man. He chooses to hang around with stupid people who have made him look terribly stupid. And that is fundamental problem. A minister of any government department has a team of experts that they work with that is drawn from industry. And the minister has failed hopelessly to draw a team of people who are representative of our sector and the industry to advise him around things like, how do you begin to create pension schemes for artists? How do you begin to promote international traffic for artists or international mobility for artists? So what he sits there with first is a department that doesn't understand their role, that their role is to be able to create policy, to create an enabling environment for the arts sector to thrive. What we're seeing the DAC doing increasingly is to play the part of an event producer, which is definitely not their role. Their role is to be able to facilitate a landscape that allows artists to be able to produce work. Artists to be able to conceptualize, create works. They should be at the forefront of creating policy. So we ask ourselves, are they really doing that? Yes, but at what speed? At the speed in which a snail farts. The white paper, how long has that white paper been in process? I am particularly excited about wanting to see that white paper being implemented because I made considerable input into that white paper, particularly on the section theatre, that almost 80% or 85% section on theatre is taken from an input that I had written up and submitted to what was Andries Olifant and Avril Jaffe and the others who were part of the working group that constituted writing up that white paper. And I based that on what I think is a clear model that can allow the arts sector to thrive in South Africa, and based on models in which other theatres across the globe operate and so forth. But that document has been sitting and accumulating dust at the DAC.
Thank you very much, Ismail. And a lot of people now it makes sense. So our focus should not only be on the minister, you understand that, but also to fix the department, and especially like position like DGs, which are very instrumental. And then someone will ask, why are people like Abu Ismail, Abu Mike van Graan, Sibongile Ngoma, and blah, 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 are not working in the department when they know what needs to be done? You understand? Why are we not seeing people like yourself and those who understand the industry occupying the position of Director General?
You know, THAMI, I'm quite comfortable working in a space where I can create work and employment and opportunities for artists. I derive my joy from being able to see artists grow and have opportunities, and to be able to see productions come alive, to be able to create festivals wherever I am. You know, and to be able to do something without consent as well. You know, the Center for Creative Arts, where I'm, and during the lockdown period, we've been able to build 3 new festivals. We've not had money from the PSP, and we've not had money from the government or in any particular way, but we've been able to mobilize resources through creative ways and through creative partnerships to be able to do that. And that for me is exciting. The closest I could possibly have come to government was to have worked for the Market Theatre Foundation. And of course, that was completely demoralizing. It broke my spirit, it broke my soul. But I'm not the only one. If I begin to look at Ernestine White, who worked at the Kimberley Museum, you know, who'd been through the same level of hell. So I would not, in my right, to work in our current bureaucracy. It is soul destroying, it is demoralizing, it kills your spirit, and you will not be able to achieve anything. And that can only change when government begins to do a great deal of reflection, asks itself the burning question: what has the DAC achieved in 27 years that we've had such a department? We've not been able to build a economy. We don't have an international touring fund. We don't have a transparent funding mechanism, and we have levels of censorship that are not as in the same way as the apartheid censorship, but that levels of censorship that are manipulated through who gets funding and who doesn't get funding, who gets access to government and who doesn't get access to government. So, you know, thank God there are people like Mike van der Graan and Sibongile Mngoma and yourself and a range of other people who work outside of government and are able to hold government accountable. We're a young democracy, and we need to have people on the outside of government who become the watchdogs, who become the canaries in the mine, who can hold people, government accountable, and who can testify when you need to be able to testify. Can you imagine if Sibongile Mngoma was not in on the outside, but ensconced in government? Who would have led that entire process of the sit-in at the National Arts Council? Who would have mobilized artists in ways that we've never seen artists mobilized in the last 27 years? And yes, myself and Sibongile have disagreed sometimes because we both value the need to be able to disagree with each other when we have to. But I hold huge for her for what she's done, because we needed what happened. You know, it's unfortunate that people had to sit in for 60 days. They mobilized, and it catalyzed a new kind of activism in the arts sector. One that begins to get people to begin to ask, you know, should we just be sitting back and accepting the rot, or should we be fighting? Should we take access of our constitutional rights that we have to protest, to hold government accountable, to question, to take you know, matters to the courts and so forth?
Before we close, Ismail, now you are working there at the center, and I remember everyone was like, what will be the next chapter for Ish after Market Theatre? Many maybe were expecting to see you as CEO in the other state-funded theatre, and then you surprise us with the center. You understand? Can you please tell us about the amazing work that the center and you have been doing in the past few years?
You know, I've always wanted to be at the Center for the Creative Arts. In fact, long history of myself and the Center for Creative Arts engaging with each other, even when I was at the National Arts Festival, with attempts to recruit me to the center at that particular time. It came as a surprise to lots of people that I'm coming to the Center for the Creative Arts. But the Center for Creative Arts and I were in dialogue with each other for almost 2 years, whilst the crisis was playing itself out at the Market Theatre Foundation. I knew where I was heading to once I had resigned from the Market Theatre Foundation. I work in an incredibly small team, but who work every day to the benefit and to the interests of the arts sector. When we got into a national lockdown last year in March, the Center for the Creative Arts was the first South African festival to go into the online virtual space with the Time of the Writer Festival. And since then, we have presented the Time of the Writer Festival, the Poetry Africa Festival, the Jamba Festival, and the Durban International Film Festival in the online space. We also launched the Artfluence Human Rights Festival. With that, we brought in the Artfluence Human Rights Award for the arts, largely to be able to create work opportunities for artists. We were able to launch a jazz festival, and we launched a cabaret and music festival, which we'll be presenting in October this year. We are also working on a series of other projects, which is a documentary program on spoken word poetry. We're busy with an anthology, and we're working with the Imbiza Journal on a publication of a journal. But we've also been able to broker several international partnerships over the last year, with much of our work being able to go across, albeit just in the online space. But we've been able to work with at least one foundation in the U.S., which has engaged several of our artists recommended by us and who've been able to earn pounds. Now, for us, it's about, yes, the online space is not the most exciting space for us as people who work in the live performing arts sector. But in March last year, when we got into the national lockdown, there was a great deal of idealism in the arts sector, with people saying, we will sit this through, this too shall pass, we will be purists and we will wait for live theatre to open. I was simply a pragmatist and a realist, and I knew that was to be a fly-by-night. COVID-19 would become devastated and decimated by the virus. And I decided at that particular time that we cannot sit back. We have to begin to create alternative modes of employment for artists. And that's exactly what I did. We launched several more festivals in our program to be able to create alternative modes of employment for artists and alternative opportunities for art, to be able to create new ways for artistic mobility between South African and international artists. Now, I think that for me is really important because, once we pass COVID-19, international exchange is not going to come back to the way in which we've known it. The world is becoming increasingly sensitized to matters of climate and climate justice and so forth. And that means the carbon footprint is going to be a major issue on the agenda, which means that we will not be seeing as much international exchanges as we've seen, with people being able to travel from one country to another country physically. That the majority of governments are going to begin to support international exchanges in the online and the digital space. And if one begins to look at the models of funding that are emerging from Europe, from several parts of Europe, it is to support online exchanges even beyond COVID. And I think the arts sector, if you really want to stay alive and be able to earn a living in the sector, you have to accept that we have to be part of the fourth industrial revolution. We cannot operate without moving into the IT space or the online space. It's going to become an essential way through which we make art. And, we've seen that change several times. If I go back to theaters of the 70s and 80s, we created big sets. And now we don't create big sets. We use screens, projected on the psyche of a theater. So we've eliminated the kind of real big sets for projections. And so theatre evolves. Theatre doesn't die. Theatre evolves in different ways. And technology has to be embraced in order to be able to be relevant, to resonate with a new generation of audiences that don't want to experience theatre in the way you and I may have experienced it 20 years ago. A new generation comes to theatre, they want to engage in social media about what they've seen, they want the experience to interact with technology, they want a wow experience that is relevant and realistic to the kind of civilization in which we live.
Ismail, before we close, I wanted you to share with us the importance of networking, building capacity, opportunities, international collaboration, resident exchanges. Because as you mentioned earlier on, I was so privileged when we went together to UK, and I've learned so much from you and the exchange program. Can you share with us the importance of those things?
THAMI, I was very fortunate that in 1995, I benefited from an international exchange program to the US, which is funded by the US Embassy. And of course, that was one of the most inspiring moments of my career, because it happened just as the country was going into this new dawn that we were entering, in the Mandela's dawn. But also, I knew that moment onwards that I was going to stop writing and I was going to stop creating work and producing work, that I wanted to go into arts leadership and work in arts administration and so forth. So that opportunity, the exchange opportunity, gave me a great deal of exposure and a great deal of networks. But I think the important thing for me is that, as an arts person, you can decide what you want to be. You want to just be the performer that takes a script, interprets the script, gets on stage, performs it, waits for the curtains to come down, the lights to go up, and you take a bow and you leave and you come back to the next rehearsal room. Or you want to be an artist that's going to be relevant. And as an artist that wants to be relevant to our times, you have to be at the center of where the buzz is. You must know what is happening. You must go to conferences. You must go to seminars. You must attend webinars. You must know who is in which organization. When there's a crisis at the NAC, you don't just go like, there's a crisis at the NAC and 30 people are in a sitting. You need to ask yourself, why are 30 people in a sitting? Why is it taking 60 days? What are they protesting about? And the more you begin to ask these kind of questions, the more you begin to understand the arts, and the more you begin to grow. Another message that I want to bureaucracy, in which we are terribly, terribly disillusioned with our current minister and our current Department of Arts and Culture. But they don't define us. They don't need to define us. And they shall not define me at all. That we achieve our successes through our own integrity and through our own strength. And if I begin to look at artists like Gregory Makoba, who doesn't who's not afraid to speak out. He provides boldly community-based, training, and then went to Sylvia Glass School, and then of course runs his own company on very strong entrepreneurial principles. And I think anyone can build a career in the arts sector, but it takes an incredible amount of hard work, it takes an incredible amount of integrity, and it takes a great deal of principles that you must believe in your principles, and you must be able to stand by your principles, regardless of whether those principles are going to be popular or not popular. You don't always have to be liked and loved. People will respect you for what you stand for, and they begin to see the shifts that you've made.
Ismail, any closing remarks on your side before we close the show? This was really very helpful, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening are going to be empowered. You understand? Any last words or remarks from your side?
Yeah, THAMI, I think we've come through almost a year and a half of absolute and real difficulty and hardship in the arts sector. We've come through a great deal of anger of what's been happening in the arts sector. But the one thing that we have not lost is our spirit. We've not lost our spirit. And no matter how much those who are in power and those who are failing us think they can kill our spirit, they shall not succeed. The arts will still continue to thrive. It will find new ways of evolving and emerging itself. But what inspires me most is that the current situation that we've seen has allowed a new generation of leaders in the arts sector to emerge. And I look at young people like Lesego van Niekerk, and I get totally inspired. I look at what you're doing, and I get totally inspired that it's no longer us with gray hair who have to be at the forefront speaking out. Us with the gray hairs need to be taking the back seat now, and we need to be able to create these kind of opportunities for young voices like yours and others to begin to be at the forefront, to give direction, to give leadership. And whether that is through active leadership that you provide, or whether it is through leadership that you provide through spaces like this, which create an opportunity for dialogue and engagement, and for artists to be able to just think, question, learn from each other. We need ourselves as arts people in the sector more than what we may have needed ourselves before. We have an enormous challenge ahead of us of rebuilding a sector and rebuilding an economy. Government does not have a plan for it at all. And no matter what the minister may try to fool us by telling us he has a master plan, that's a load of bullshit. Because a master plan cannot be implemented if you have not created a risk mitigation strategy that you've sold and won the support of from the very people and the very industry that you are trying to save. And there has not been that engagement with the sector at that particular level, and particularly the parts of the sector that feel the most disillusioned, the most disappointed, and so forth. So it is up to the artists to mobilize, to organize themselves, to support the new formations that are being established, to understand what new formations like TADA, TDESA, I'm for the Arts, the Stand Foundation, the Trubio thing are all about, and how you can begin to strengthen the capacity of those institutions that will be able to take us into a new era for cultural leadership in this country and for the way we grow the arts sector and an arts economy in our country. And as old people like myself and all the others, I'd say quite boldly, our responsibility is to hand the baton over. But we need to do it with a level of guidance. We need to make sure that we nurture a new generation of young leaders. And I think this is what the Stand Foundation does in a very focused way. It's a position, whether it's myself or Grady McCormack, Mike van Graan, Yvette Hardy, Sarki Botha, and I could name a few more people, is that we've taken on board a number of young people that we are grooming to become the next generation of leaders in our sector who can offer the kind of visionary and inspiring leadership that we would come out of the doldrums that we presently find out of poor administration and the government has betrayed our hopes and aspirations.
Thank you very much, Nkosi kakhulu, Ismail, for coming on board and having this engagement. Thank you. God bless. Thank you. We are out.
Thank you very much. Thank you.